All right, thank you so much for showing up at the beautiful Lucy Parson Center. Does anyone object to my removing my mask so that for lip reading purposes, just give a thumbs up if that makes you feel uncomfortable. Otherwise, I will remove my mask. So my name is Liz. I'm an organizer with FAMM. I'm also a neurodivergent person who lives with chronic pain. I'm the parent of a neurodivergent child. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm an aspiring accomplice to the ongoing struggle for disability justice. You may have noticed the words "access is love" on our event graphic. Did anyone notice those when it was read to you? Or does anyone want to share what the word access means to you? You can raise your hand if you're able. Or if you feel so inclined. Sure. Go ahead.
I feel that access is love because it means inclusion and not leaving others out.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share thoughts on the definition of access? Well, one of Merriam-Webster's definitions is the freedom or ability to obtain or make use of something. So for example, the freedom to use public spaces, the freedom to obtain goods and services. These most basic access accommodations are still being withheld from disabled people in our country today. That's wrong, right? We know that's wrong. We want to change that. So we know that every single person deserves to have their basic needs met. Every single disabled person deserves to have their basic needs met, because disabled people are people and disability rights are human rights. So working to make sure we meet everyone's access needs is a powerful way we can show that we care about one another. So I hear some voices, which is wonderful. We could do a little inside volume. That would be awesome, but whatever works. Today's program will center disabled movement leaders from our community with contributions from able-bodied individuals as well. We'll kick off things with a child-led Braille story time, followed by a 45-minute panel discussion whose target audience is going to be adults, but appropriate for everyone to witness. And the whole time, Jackie and Anna will person the ASL and Braille activity stations. Anna and Jackie, can you raise your hands? Yep, so that'll be going the whole time, and that's appropriate for every age. We also have Nick Schillingford and his lovely spouse who are here and who supplied us with free social justice books for all ages. So check that out. And then we have a calming corner, got coloring sheets, allergen-free snacks. You'll notice that there's a marked restroom sign. There are 3 restrooms. If you just go to the left outside the hall. So now that we're oriented, feel free to make use of the space in whatever way feels right for your body and doesn't endanger your neighbor, excuse me. Alan Farnham is here to interpret for us. Many thanks for being here, Alan. And quickly, before launching into the program proper, FAMM and Healthcare Workers for Palestine, Twin Cities, want to acknowledge that we're gathering on the sacred, traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota Oyate, the Dakota people. This land was stolen from the Dakota through horrific exploitation and violence. Our groups recognize that settler colonialism and white supremacist, hetero-capitalist, patriarchal models are fundamentally eugenicist and ableist. And so we pledge not just to acknowledge the history of this land we're occupying and standing on, but to actively struggle for a future characterized by justice and liberation for all Indigenous peoples, from Turtle Island to Pacifica, from the African continent to Palestine. All right, who's ready for the program to commence? Go on. Makes myself right. I promise I am. Just flipping my page. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to our first presenter with a bio that she dictated to her mama. So if you want, would you like to sit up here or stand in front of the table with Bob? And then you can speak into the mic, which is pretty cool. And Alan. Oh, okay. Awesome. So Jube's making her way over here. I'm gonna. It's the best. Yeah. That feels right. So I'm going to give you the mic. Once you're seated. Perfect. Ready, Mama?
This is what we do, also known Uju Dubnin Dishanakas, Anungi Queen Indigo, Red Lake and June Java, Madasway and the Bunakis, Magazine and Jude, Nimanoy and Ringum, meet you, meet with us. Helen Keller. Until May. Author and educator. Helen grew up in the deep south, and when she was very young, she contracted an illness which meant she became deaf and blind. Her family did everything they could to support her. And although Helen sometimes felt as if she was at sea in a dense fog. Yeah. She used her her quick hands to make up signs to communicate. The cook and her family had a daughter who was Helen's friend and understood her hand signs. By the time Helen was 7, she had invited 60 signs. Sometimes Helen was very frustrated because it was so hard to communicate. And she found the frustration hard to control. She would throw tantrums, kicking. Anyone who came near as Helen grew older, her parents looked for a way to educate them. Daughter and traveled to Boston to the Perkins School for the Blind. They recommended a tutor named Anne Sullivan, who agreed to be Helen's God witness. Anne came to Helen's house on the 5th of March, 1667. Day Helen described as my soul's birthday. Helen had not realized that every object in the world had a word. It was only and taught him to spell out water with her fingers. While running water gently over her hands, she understood Helen at once. Demanded to know signs for everything. Determined to communicate with the world, Helen began learning to speak in a clear Eloquent, eloquent voice. As she couldn't hear the sounds she needed to make, this took her many years to accomplish. With Anne Sullivan at her side, Helen was able to attend school and then college, meeting many people who inspired her on her journey. At the age of 21, she wrote the story of my life and traveled all over the world, speaking about her achievements and winning people's hearts. Helen fought to raise the profile of disabled people and became an advocate for women's rights. She set up the Helen Keller Institute and co-founded an American Civil Liberty Union She won many awards and accolades and gave speeches around the world. Her book was turned into a TV show or a TV series and Broadway played and she became a world renowned activist champion technology and imagination.
This is also her first pass through this, so.
Wow.
Great.
One more round of applause. That was beautiful. Thank you, Anangikwe, Little Doob. I'm gonna give a little bit of a blurb that, that you dictated to your mom yesterday, because I think it's beautiful. Just for context, Doob uses she, her pronouns, hers pronouns. She's a Mexican Ojibwe Palestinian blind person who's going to be reading, well, she just read in the book. But at our next disability justice action, she will read another one if she wants. So excellent, that was beautiful. Now, we're gonna launch into the second portion of the program, which again is geared toward an adult audience, but is appropriate for everyone to be bearing witness to. If our panelists can make their way up at your own pace, then we will get started on that. We're honored to welcome these four movement leaders from our community. We have Selwa, Sam, Aaron, and Nadia. If anyone needs a sheet of paper to jot down questions, should we have time for the Q&A at the end? Eric, can you raise your hand? Eric is able to distribute those if you want to signal that you're interested in a notepad for questions. No pressure though, of course. So we're going to open this panel with Aaron Johnson, seated to my left. Aaron is a consultant for the state of Minnesota on addiction, public health, and homelessness. He's an impassioned disability rights activist and a gifted videographer who is currently filming a documentary about unhoused encampments with a strong focus on Camp Nenukasi. Let's welcome Aaron. Thank you for being here. Is it okay if he takes his mask off for speaking clarity purposes?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. So our first question, what roles, in your opinion, what role does the lack of community-based services and support systems play in the homelessness crisis among people with disabilities?
Thanks. Just to clarify, you mean like basically like as a disabled person and in my perspective, like what are we missing from the sorry, hey, how's it going?
It's a long answer, so
I mean, essentially what I'm seeing is you know, in terms of the housing crisis in the US at large, and what I know best, which is locally speaking, a lot of shelters do not have adequate resources for people with visual impairments. A lot of times I've heard of a shelter, the elevator was out of service, but it was like months and months. It wasn't just like, I mean, yeah, that kind of thing happens, but they clearly had either no intentions or no funding, or I don't know, but it wasn't being repaired. So that starts with just the resources that are available to pull people out of emergency situations, but then that it starts there and it kind of filters down because, you know, there are 40 to 57% of unsheltered, unhoused people in the US, depending on which study you look at, are disabled. And that's only just diagnosed. You know, we don't know how many people are neurodivergent and overwhelmed and, you know, having classic burnout phases that they don't even know they're neurodivergent because of gender issues, because of racial issues. You know, white boys, statistically speaking, are monitored at a much younger age for things like ADHD, whereas like a indigenous girl is less likely. So, you know, I think even this issue alone is largely an issue of accessibility and lack of resources for the disabled at large.
Absolutely, thank you for sharing that. It sort of piggybacks off of that, this next question. So existing systems, which are, you know, like healthcare, disability benefits, social safety nets, how do they fail to address the needs of disabled individuals who are at risk of becoming unhoused? And what, can you name any tangible improvements for those of existing?
Well, so a little bit about my story or just a story, I guess, is about 5 years ago, I was living in Los Angeles. I'm from here. Actually, my mom's apartment used to be on 4 blocks away, but, so I'm like really from here, but, I was living in LA. I went to Disney World, Florida. It was my first time. It was December 2019. And, I came back to LA. Excuse me, this microphone is kind of, do you want to actually?
Sorry, yeah, that's true.
And, all right.
Yes.
All right, thank you for your patience. Went to Disney World, Florida. I came back to LA. I had a stroke the next day, and we had never heard of COVID yet, but I got a very early case of COVID. It was December 9th, 2019. We only found out kind of how it worked, and were able to say that's what it was as of March 2023. So, you know, it was a mystery the whole time. Long story short, you know, obviously I ended up moving back here March 1st, 2020, hell of a time to move to South Minneapolis. And I spent the next 4 years with no disability benefits, with no nothing. I was lucky to have pandemic unemployment assistance available for a short time, and that helped with housing and stuff. But once the Biden administration, not to put, but I'm just saying, like, historically speaking, that's when they cut the benefits, like all the COVID pandemic help, that included like no plan for anyone disabled. There was, you know, COVID was a mass disabling event. If you think about long COVID, I mean, I am technically, this is an example of long COVID. I had a stroke. It was caused by COVID interacting with my autoimmune disease, and it left me paralyzed from the neck down. They didn't know if I'd ever walk again. I could walk easily, pain, but there's nothing in place. And I fought for a long time directly with the state of Minnesota to, as a consultant role, to get long COVID benefits during that time. And it's just kind of funny because they wrote the bill in a way that I myself did not qualify. Like they shrink who qualifies. So, you know, all of these things combined, it took 4 years. What would you do for 4 years with no income, with no anything, no benefits, no help? That means like I need assistance, you know, around my apartment and stuff. So, I mean, they're really, people say like there's disability benefits or, you know, in the general sense that's true, but it is so strongly lacking. And these are examples of how disabled people end up on the street.
Powerful testimony. Thank you for that. So pretty sweeping, broad question. What can we do to create more inclusive housing solutions that cater to the needs of disabled individuals, including both physical accessibility and community support?
The magic wand? No, I would say, it starts with, when I'm in the unhoused encampments, one thing that I hear frequently is that people feel that, they've been given up on. And that's kind of why I mentioned like undiagnosed neurodivergence, is because I did not realize I was neurodivergent until I became physically disabled. And when I started learning about disabilities, like really from a political perspective, because of what I was newly experiencing at that time, I started learning all kinds of things about, and I had been diagnosed ADHD, but I didn't even really know what that meant. And it was a very recent diagnosis at the time anyways. And so like I started learning that I'm very likely on the spectrum, and I still can't get screened for that. Like I'm fighting to get even just screened. So it starts in the healthcare, it starts with believing people, it starts with caring, and I mean like actually listening and being like, wow, that's pretty wild story you just shared or whatever. And like just knowing that I blamed myself for a very long time. I was homeless on and off over the period of 17 years. And, a lot of that time I lived with like 4 roommates and, different things. But a lot of the times I was just night to night, no clue, all my things in storage, whatever, on and off for like 17 years. And a lot of that time I was just heavily blaming myself, not understanding myself. So now I understand, oh, that's why I was always passed up for jobs, or that's why this, that, whatever. But so I think it's just, education, understanding, compassion, and just realize that there's a very good chance if you see somebody living on the street, like they are struggling, they are fighting, they don't even understand themselves. Things like schizophrenia is not a choice. My aunt is schizophrenic. She was homeless. I had to look for, searching everywhere. When there's polar vortexes and stuff, shelters can't tell me anything because of privacy and all this stuff. But it's like, she never once woke up and made that choice. Like she's suffering her whole life.
Right. I really wish we had another 3 hours for each of the panelists.
No, thanks for listening.
But I think we're gonna move on. Thank you so much, Aaron, for that considered reflection and testimony. Our next panelist is Dr. Sam Sharp. Dr. Sharp is a professor of biology and social transformation studies, a mental health peer support advocate, and an organizer with Healthcare Workers for Palestine and JVP. Much of their peer advocacy work focuses on addressing structural and institutional barriers to healthcare for underserved populations, an issue they have also dealt with in seeking care as a person with multiple disabilities and chronic conditions. Thank you for being here, Sam. Let's give a round of applause and warm welcome.
Thank you. Is my mic working?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am going to keep my mask on, which I know reduces sound quality, so I will try to project as well as possible, and please let me know if I need to speak louder or more slowly.
Thank you, Sam. You sound pretty clear to me, actually, and then we have Alan above me, which is wonderful. Aaron touched on the interplay of overlapping multiple marginalities that put disabled people at risk for neglect, abuse, attempted erasure. It's so important to take a broad view of how these issues are very much interconnected. So our first question, many people struggle to connect the dots between individual suffering and systemic violence. How can we raise awareness and build solidarity so that people see the connection between their struggles and the struggles of others around the world?
So I think part of the reason why many people struggle to make these connections is not because of anything that they're doing wrong. It's because these systems are designed to be invisible, especially to those who benefit from them. They're designed to go unchallenged so that the people they're benefiting and the systems of power they're benefiting remain in place. And something that I think this really ties into is how we are understanding disability. Is anyone here familiar with the concept of the social versus the medical model of disability? So
Yes.
quite a few people. I am gonna go over it briefly just so we're all on the same page, but the medical model of disability identifies disability as a problem or deficit within a person's body or mind or both, and says that the way that you resolve challenges that they're experiencing related to their disability is by enacting some kind of medical intervention on them. So trying to fix what's supposedly broken with them, and then that should, in theory, according to that model, eliminate the problem. And in contrast, the social model of disability identifies the challenges that disabled people experience as largely being related to a lack of access to the things that they need and to barriers that are placed in society between them and the things that they need. And so the intervention to resolve those challenges is to change the society that they live in to not have those barriers to access. And I think that this model is important, especially in response to the question that Liz has posed in terms of being able to expose these systems of ableist oppression and inaccessibility. And once we start being aware of those systems and how they're working, that is really helpful, not only for being able to meet specific needs that disabled people have, but moving away from seeing disability as something that's an individual deficit and treating disabled people with pity and a sense of othering that can be really damaging. And this can allow us to sort of operate from a framework where we are constantly questioning, is the way that we're doing things meeting people's needs, or is there a different way we can do it? What assumptions are we operating off of? What expectations do we have that aren't going to actually be true for all of the people that we want to be in community with, and how can we do things differently to change that? And one other thing I want to touch on with this question is the word awareness, because I think that for trying to solve many of these problems, awareness is a critical first step. For example, we can't create the access needs, or we can't accommodate the access needs, we can't provide the things that disabled people need if we aren't aware of what access is, what accommodation is, and what that looks like, even if we're not using those specific words. But I sometimes see an emphasis on awareness as something that can be an end in itself, and we can feel good because we did awareness, we raised awareness, but in almost every case, that's not enough. We need to have awareness that leads to material change. And in some cases, awareness for awareness' sake is not just unhelpful, it's also a trap. I'm also a member of the transgender community, and looking at how things have progressed over the last 15 years, there is absolutely an increase in awareness of transgender people and things that we need to survive. And because that hasn't been accompanied by an increase in safety and access to resources, that has allowed people who don't want trans folks to exist to pass very specific policies to take away the things that we need in a way that awareness has negatively facilitated.
Wow. That's all I got. Next question, related. In your view, Sam, how do systemic oppressions like racism, ableism, capitalism, and patriarchy intertwine to create cycles of suffering and disability? And how can we address these systemic issues simultaneously to create broader social change?
So I think the short answer to this question is that oppression is disabling. And one of the ways that it is disabling is through dehumanization, and that relates both to the ways that disabled people are often dehumanized, but also the ways in which dehumanizing people sets up the ability to perpetuate these forms of violence and oppression on them. And there's a lot of ways in which, as I mentioned before, with these systems that are made invisible, that we're taught not to be aware of, that we are subjected to manufactured consent to believe that some people do not deserve rights, safety, and life chances, that some people's lives don't matter. And that happens through language. Dehumanizing language is a big part of that. That is very, very, very clear in the way that the Israeli government and military talk about Palestinians, including Palestinian children. And that has been repeated by a lot of politicians in the United States and also by a lot of supposedly mainstream media outlets in the United States, and that dehumanizing language sort of makes it more acceptable, supposedly, to treat people who have been dehumanized in that way in really, really horrific ways and treat lives as disposable. And we also see that within the United States in the way that dehumanizing language is used towards people of color, disabled people, trans people, and many other populations. And in addition to the language that's being used, as Erin was talking about, allowing conditions to exist where people's needs are not met and allowing that to go unchallenged. And when people become accustomed to that, that's also a form of dehumanization, because if we care about each other and if we see each other as equals, that's unacceptable. And so I think part of challenging this is refusing the language that enables this dehumanization, and then refusing the things that are happening that further it. So refusing the possibility that we can just let people experience this level of neglect and lack of access and lack of care. And in the work that we can do, I think sometimes that looks like pushing for systemic change to resolve those issues. And sometimes when systems are not changing fast enough, or when we don't even know where to start because nobody is listening to us, it means doing other things to fill in those gaps, such as forms of community care and mutual aid, and just even witnessing each other, because another really insidious aspect of dehumanization is not allowing people to tell their own stories, not believing them, and not giving them space to be heard and have those experiences be given the same power that people whose lives are treated as more valuable are given when they tell their stories or talk about what they believe in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna go with one last question. Healthcare is often seen as a separate issue from social justice, but the two are deeply connected. Can you discuss how healthcare needs, especially for marginalized groups, are shaped by the larger struggles for human rights, justice, and dignity?
So this is also something where I could give a 3-hour answer, but I'll try and give a 2-minute answer. So health and healthcare are inherently social justice issues. One of the starkest examples of this that I've been thinking about a lot is something that I heard from the various healthcare workers who I've had the privilege from hearing from, who have worked in Gaza over the last 1.5 years, including Palestinian healthcare workers based in Gaza and people from all over the world who've traveled there on medical missions. And everybody said that there is no soap in the hospitals. And there are so many types of atrocities that many of us have seen and heard about, but that one sticks with me because it's such a basic thing that has not been permitted to exist in that hospital setting by the logic of this project of genocide that's being enacted in Gaza. And how can you have healthcare if you don't have soap? How can you provide basic healthcare? And how can you provide complicated surgeries attempting to treat wounds that people have acquired from 2,000-pound bombs if you don't have soap? And that's just one of the many ways in which not allowing the conditions necessary for health is an issue of social justice, both in terms of every aspect of people's lives and also in healthcare. And I think even in addition to thinking about, do we have the supplies that we need for healthcare, there's so many other aspects to this, including going back to this issue of dehumanization, who is considered to be capable of health. When we think about those definitions, they're not neutral. They are very tied to the historic ways that healthcare has been shaped by eugenics and white supremacy, and some people's bodies and lives have never been seen as being capable of health. There's been this view that some people's bodies and lives are fundamentally inferior. We see this with disabled people, with people of color, with intersex peoples. There's this thought that those bodies are inherently pathological and this definition of health isn't made for them. So I think that there's so many things that need to be done at so many different levels to understand how healthcare is inherently a social justice issue and make the healthcare that we are providing be carried out with that type of understanding and not just focus on this very individualized idea of are you doing health promoting behaviors, but also looking at all of these other aspects of what is the system of healthcare wasn't meant to serve you, and do you have access to the things that you need, even on a very, very basic level to access not even health, but well-being and survival, and being able to reclaim a level of humanization and value when that's been attempted to be systemically taken.
Thank you so much. That was really illuminating. We're gonna move to our third panelist. Sawa, do you have a mic? I think you can share the mic. That's cool. So yeah, next up we have Sawa Nubani, who's a Palestinian American psychiatry physician who grew up in Palestine and is a member of Healthcare Workers for Palestine Twin Cities. Growing up and witnessing the Second Intifada was a catalyst in Dr. Nubani's personal pursuit of becoming a physician. Much of her journey of becoming a physician since moving to the U.S. has been in underserved rural parts of the country, where she began to connect the dots regarding similarities between life in Palestine and life here, with respect to the forces that contribute to poor health outcomes. So it's lovely to have you here. Sam was speaking at length about how the many challenges when it comes to cultivating popular awareness around how individual suffering and systemic violence are very much linked much of the time. In what ways can we shift from seeing disability as an individual condition to understanding it as a collective issue? And how does reframing disability in this way help us to see the interconnectedness of all struggles, including those related to war, oppression, and occupation?
I'm gonna actually, is it okay if I take this?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. And so for me, it's, if you look at the violence that's being like placed on a people, and we use the word systemic violence and oppression often. So in order to address something that's systemic, that attacks every aspect of life, from the small social interactions to your shelter, to your family life, to your work life, that means you can't make it an individual issue, right? Not to separate the individual needs of a person, right? We have specific needs of our own. But in order to target and actually oppose a system that is put in place to attack every part of it, you need to get together in order to address it. Not one person can do that on their own. So when you individualize it, rightfully so, again, not to dismiss people's individual needs, you put the onus on the person. It's almost like this is your problem, these are your needs, instead of this is our problem because of how we set up this system, and this is the needs that you've resulted in requiring because I have not given you access to it. I think that for me, it's such an odd thing about like accessibility, because I feel like the systems we put in place makes it that we have to even come up with the word accessibility rather than it be a natural construct, right? The fact that we have to come up with ways and then explain why we deserve funding for such a thing to be put in place. Growing up in Palestine, unfortunately, I wasn't exposed to disability justice work. If anything, I'm very new to it, so I appreciate you guys having me on this panel. I was wondering, where is my part in this? And thinking back to it, I didn't realize what things we didn't have accessible to us growing up in Palestine. And it wasn't until I came to the US and realized, oh, whoa, there's a lot missing. And then I became part of this society and I'm like, oh, whoa, there's still a lot missing. But what was it different back home? It was the collective approach. So if somebody back home had an access need, yeah, we may not have had a ramp set up or maybe a large enough space, but you bet if somebody was at a bus stop and could not get onto a bus, there's no such thing as time. It's fine. The bus is gonna be late. That might not fly in the US or maybe a place like Japan, right? But men and women will stop there carry the individual, carry their supplies and put them on that bus. You bet that bus is not gonna leave without them. So we will find a way, and the way we find that is through community. And the thing is about colonialism and fascism and imperial world is to individualize you, actually almost to a sickeningly pathological level. Because then you focus on the you and not the us. The complete antithesis and the complete opposite of colonial ideas is community. So community getting together. The word mutual aid did not exist in my vocabulary until I came to America, because growing up in Palestine, I could knock on my neighbor's door and get sugar when I ran out of sugar. If it was the season of figs, I'd pick up the figs and I'd go to my neighbor with the baskets as a child. And if that elderly person was trying to do dishes and stuff, guess what? I was sitting there doing dishes with them. And I got a second breakfast that morning. Like, why would I complain? Did they get all the gossip of my household from me that morning? Yeah. But that elderly person did not have to reach out for somebody. It was naturally set up in the culture and in the community.
Beautiful, beautiful, thank you so much. The next question that I have here. In healthcare, we often focus on treating individual symptoms, but there's also a need to address collective trauma. How can you speak to the importance of looking at collective health and the ways in which community care can help heal shared wounds caused by systemic violence and oppression? Honestly, I feel like you really did a great job touching on that one.
I realized that a lot of the topics that I would, until I realized that yesterday.
It's all interconnected, man.
Yeah, I do. I think one thing to think about it as like a psychiatrist, for example, a lot of people right now, I'm seeing an uptick in, frightening thoughts. I feel like there's children here, but thoughts of like existential crisis that people are having, despair. And I find myself thinking like, I don't want to pathologize you. Yeah, we don't want to dismiss treating your diagnosis, of course, but I don't want to go with this Western ideology, just pathologizing and putting a medication towards it. So I find myself lately a lot talking about community and educating people about, hey, like finding people who have shared values, no matter what those values are, to get through these struggles. And when you think about it, if you've heard of like AA or Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, all of these groups, they're not led by professionals, right? It's led by individuals who have managed to maintain sobriety and community. So it doesn't take like a professional to treat things. It takes actually finding people who have shared common experiences to validate that experience. And this is where like the golden standards of like medical treatment does not work, right? A lot of indigenous treatment is collectively done. It is done in group efforts, group ceremonies. Yes, individual prayer, like in a Sufi culture, one could be individualistic and spiritual, but at the end of the day, there's lots of like group spiritual prayers. And I noticed this in many other indigenous communities and in many other faiths, actually, no matter what the faiths are. And that's like that power of collective experience. And it makes you not feel othered.
Definitely. Thank you. Last question. So in your experience, how do the effects of war and conflict lead to the creation of new disabilities or the exacerbation of pre-existing disabilities in individuals? And could you share any specific examples or cases that you personally witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, of course, other than the obvious of like war causing physical disability and, as we've seen right now in Gaza, even before, in 2017, the statistics was like 21% population dealing with some form of disabilities. So, and then on top of it, we're talking about targeted disabilities. This is like goes back to eugenics, right? Because if you don't aim to a certain part of a body to end one's life, you aim to one that disables them in a way that is intentional, such as the statistics of IOF targeting the groin area of our young men and intentionally. It's why a majority of the injuries that you see are actually lower bottom half of the body rather than upper half. And it's why the children are usually head. So, sorry, that's not. But when you think of this and you think of, that's like on the extreme end of course, disabling a society. You think of all the other forms of disabling a society. So even those in diaspora, you know, or even other communities within the US who have survived a genocide, who have survived ethnic cleansing, who have survived war-torn places, or even just being indigenous in the US and witnessing this happening in other parts. This lives in our nervous system, generational trauma. And trauma, the way it lives in every part of your body. You can't separate it. You can't separate the experience. You can't, no matter how well you are at compartmentalizing, it is affecting you in every part of your life. And that's where right now with like Doctors Against Genocide, we're focusing on being sick from genocide, because we are literally, as a community, have become sick from genocide. Other than the intentional targeting of healthcare infrastructures and communities and disabling of people, it's the intentional destruction of anything possible to support it. And even as us, as healthcare professionals working every day of our lives to treat our patients while we are ourselves holding on to whatever we can to keep ourselves together, expected to separate the two. Be the doctor, be there for your patient, separate your identities, separate how you're feeling, separate the fact that you're witnessing every day people like yourself who took an oath to treat people, no matter what their background is, with tools you deservingly should be having to treat people with, and just ignore it. Turn a blind eye and do your job. And it's not okay, and it's not right, and we need to speak up. Our patients should speak up. Us healthcare professionals should speak up. So I feel like I lost the question, but yes, lots of flaring up. We already know that high cortisol levels further increase the susceptibility to an autoimmune disease. You're at a risk statistically if you already genetically have the risk of an autoimmune disease, but it might be 10 years down the line. But every time you have high cortisol levels, high stress environment, that brings that to activate sooner. Like it's part of epigenetics. It's why schizophrenia is more likely to happen, and every one of us have a 1% chance of developing it in society statistically, but it increases as our ACE scores, our adverse childhood experiences score is higher. And so you keep on adding one hit after another, which then tells you it's the marginalized communities that are at highest risk of these chronic conditions flaring up.
Wow, really important stuff. Thank you so much, Sawa. We're gonna move forward or backward as the case may be to our fourth and final panelist now, Nadia Har. Nadia is an organizing member of FAMM. She's a Lebanese mother, artist, and mental health support specialist who is part of the disabled community. She's passionate about collective liberation and radical love. Nadia uses art to express these values and her identity and to share her belief that we are all connected. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you. Is it okay if I read my name?
Any objections? So our first question, the term access is love is a powerful message. How do you define this concept when it comes to people with disabilities, and why is it so important in the context of disability justice?
Thank you for that question. To me, as mentioned with our other panelists, access really is about solidarity, care, compassion. It is necessary for moving out of systems of oppression and into more of that collective liberation movement. Disability justice emphasizes that access is fundamental. And it also is an expression of interdependence because we are all connected and we also all can benefit from care. And so this notion of connectedness and interdependence is necessary as well. And disabled people should not have to fight for basic inclusion or their rights or to have their needs met. And so Access is Care is kind of taking that into consideration and helping us move towards providing access in a proactive way instead of in this like after effect way, kind of like after injustices then we move forward, but maybe we can work towards proactively providing access for all. It's important to shift that conversation away from obligation to care. I apologize,
You're doing great. You're doing so great.
Thanks. So disability justice also moves beyond legal frameworks and compliance to focus on lived experiences, agency, and leadership of disabled people, particularly those at the intersections of race, gender, class, and queerness. And as mentioned, we move beyond individual accommodation to collective liberation. And so all of this is in this notion of access is love, because we can provide love by providing all of our access proactively.
Yeah, thank you. So we know access isn't just about physical accommodations, right? It's also about emotional, social accessibility. How can we create environments where people with disabilities feel seen, heard, and valued?
Yeah, emotional and social accessibility is about changing the way that we see, relate to, and support disabled people. It's about making sure that access is not just about getting in the door, it's about belonging once inside. When we approach access from a place of love, we create a world where disabled people don't have to fight to be seen, heard, and valued.
Yeah, what the turn actually your hand up. Yeah.
Thank you. Is it okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, and then when we approach access from a place of love, we create a world where disabled people don't have to be to fight to be seen, heard, and valued, but are embraced as essential, beautiful, and powerful members of our community.
Right.
I feel like maybe that was me.
Yeah.
I'll take
I'm blaming you.
culpability for that. So can you speak a bit more about the connection between access, safety, and healing for people with disabilities?
Oh, yeah, this is critical. Access is love, safety is dignity, healing is justice, and these three are inseparable. When we build a world that prioritizes access, we create safety. When safety exists, healing becomes possible. And when healing happens, disabled people and all of us can envision and create a future rooted in justice, care, and liberation. We can do this, and like the three concepts, are linked because like access is a prerequisite for safety, physical safety, social safety, and economic safety. And as Aaron was discussing, many disabled people live in poverty due to systemic barriers in employment, education, and healthcare. And without access, disabled people are often forced into unsafe situations. Safety is essential for healing, emotional and psychological safety. Many disabled people experience trauma, whether from medical violence, ableism, abuse, or neglect. Healing requires spaces where they feel safe, believed, and supported. I know from experiencing childhood trauma, and I had a very difficult time healing that trauma and when I wasn't in safe spaces, and that was critical in order for me to look at my trauma, see how it affected me, but also lean in towards self-love, self-compassion, and self-care. And that was impossible until I was in a safe situation. And then, yeah, healing leads to collective liberation. Disability justice is about healing from oppression. And the disability justice movement, led by Black, brown, queer, and disabled activists, emphasizes that true justice requires not just survival, but healing from the trauma of systemic ableism, racism, and capitalism. And yeah, that cultural shift towards access and love is necessary. Healing happens when the society shifts from treating accessibility as a burden to seeing it as love in action.
Can you briefly name any public policy system changes that are warranted in your mind to reflect that idea of access to love?
Yes, there are many, and we are running out of time, so I won't be able to go into detail, but just some ideas. It would be wonderful if we can fully fund and enforce disability rights laws. So strengthening the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, but also international disability protections as well. Providing universal health care with disability-centered care is necessary. I think also training medical professionals to understand and respect disability justice principles. And also eliminating forced institutionalization and provide community-based care alternatives. Guaranteed income and economic justice could be wonderful because it removes barriers and it establishes like universal basic income to reduce poverty among disabled people and remove barriers in programs like the Social Security Disability Insurance Program and supplemental security income. Just different things like that, fully accessible public transportation, transforming education into a fully inclusive system. My son and I, we just went forward with my family with getting an IEP for him. And I loved that the school was trying as the best to have him included in the classroom instead of separated. I think that that was super beneficial for him for learning and growing as an individual. Yeah, disability justice in the criminal, legal, and immigration systems. Yeah, there's just so many. And centering disability justice in climate and disaster policy. So funding disabled-led climate justice initiatives that recognize the unique impacts of environmental racism and ableism, and ensuring accessible and sustainable housing that is climate resistant. Just some things. A world where access is love is one where disabled people don't have to fight for their humanity.
Yes,
That's my take.
yeah, that's the right take as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for helping to breathe life into this, our first joint disability justice action. So can we get a round of applause once more? Parson?
Sorry, kind of a last minute thing that just crossed my mind. I was at a candle vigil for a transgender man, Sam Norquist, who was, well, he's in the news and I don't know, there's kids around, but you know, during that, I heard a quote from Paul Wellstone: "We all do better when we all do better." And I just want to leave off on that.
So we do have a couple of questions. I think we can plow through them in an efficient way. I can answer the first one. So our panelists and young reader from this morning comfortable with taking and posting pics to social media. Can you all speak to that? With a thumb? How about Duke's mom? Posted social media? Yes, yes, absolutely. When it comes to individuals who are attending, you probably want to obtain their consent first. And usually with FAMM, we will block out individual spaces if they're under 18. But sounds like you got to go. Go ahead. We do have, I don't know if anyone can see the script, but the question is, what is disability? Does anyone want to venture to, you know, come up with an answer for that? That's a really good question. From a 6-year-old, yeah.
Disability is what you label
people who can't be as productive as the system wants them to be.
Did you hear that? Do you want to use my mic?
Disability is what the system labels people when they are not able to be as productive as the system needs them to be to uphold itself.
I feel like I left off on such an awesome note. Now I'm saying, like, I do want to piggyback on what you just said, because one thing that I experienced, I'm gonna keep it above, I'm a straight white male, cis male. And there are many parts of this society that are designed to cater toward me. And even though it is true that, like I said, I was homeless on and off for so many years, like, I recognize my privilege. And when I literally woke up having, when I literally woke up in the middle of the night having a stroke one time, and I had become initially paralyzed from the neck down from it. I woke up in a hospital bed. All right, I went through a whole thing. That's a whole story. But like, our medical systems, by the way. I mean, at one point while I was having the stroke, they didn't believe me and they forged my signature on a discharge, and they were trying to dump me out of the curb and Skid Row. Just for some awareness. They thought I was homeless, and that's part of the reason I'm what I'm doing. But like, one of the things that I had credit card debt, I was living a life when that happened, and a couple of weeks later I realized, like, I'm not going to be going back to work being able to make these payments, but I had some GoFundMe, and I called American Express and I said, hey, I have some GoFundMe, but I can't pay the whole thing. Can we just like settle on something? And they were like, oh no, like literally laughed like that. And they were like, I'm afraid not. And I was just like, oh, you're never getting a cent from me ever. So I just never paid it. But what the thought process that was going through my head, what I realized is, in a capitalist society, we depend on our physical, body, our mind, and we depend on that to generate revenue. And it goes towards the GDP. And so what are you in a capitalist society if you don't have a body or mind to generate revenue? And then under capitalism, how are you viewed if you're not contributing toward the GDP? Especially, it's scary to talk about, but especially like in a system that's designed to eliminate expenses. And if you're living on healthcare and different expenses, you're on the chopping block, like you, the individual, the person. So that to me is how disability sort of, what is disability? What is it under capitalism? Because under a lot of indigenous, there's so many different nations, but a lot of indigenous tribes to Turtle Island, there isn't even a word for disability in some languages. Like if you need help, the tribe or, the town or the village, they just give you food. And you might be good at telling jokes or like stories or like sharing wisdom, and that's what you're kind of chipping in, but so what is disability? It's like, what is it in capitalism, I guess?
Yeah, really important point. Thank you for that. And I think that that was a natural segue between the two comments. We only have time for one more question. That's okay. It's not your bad. I'm actually impressed that we have one for one more. So this one is beautiful. It says, in any conversations about disability, we should also acknowledge disability joy. If we only acknowledge disability as suffering, we develop negative stereotypes. Where do you find joy, Helen?
For me, I find joy in both going inward and outward. So connecting with FAMM, I'm in a choir, and just different ways of like staying connected with others brings me joy. And also I'm on a journey of self-discovery or unearthing, really, finding who I am and expressing who I am, and that brings me joy. And just really that like self-love and being able to heal in life along with that was a beautiful question. It's not just about what the struggles are, but also where we are going and how do we move forward with all of this. So thanks for that question.
Very similar in that sense. For me, joy is the community that I find. You know, the connecting with others, the being able to be vulnerable with other people, and like being loved unconditionally, even when you might sometimes have your negative internal monologue, to the point where you start saying, why am I so negative internally when so much love is coming my way? And that is so powerful. It allows for the inward healing because your outward is secure in your connections with others. And that's the joy. And joy of just spending time with each other, joy of trying different food and cooking and the different aromas and the simple things, you know, simple things of learning to be comfortable with how cold it is outside and seeing that people are walking and still enjoying it. And like, wow, I didn't think I could see people enjoying freezing cold weather. So there's joy in many things, even when you did not expect it. So just, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess first I'd like to echo what everyone else has said about the importance of community and feeling witnessed, feeling connection, having shared passions, especially when spend so much time being angry about injustice. It feels really healing to just be around people who also feel that way, and I don't have to try and mitigate that or not come across that way, because it is a very understandable response to the situations that we find ourselves in. And something else that I find joy in is my original academic background is in biology, and one of the reasons that I like biology is because we have very few laws. Like every type of task that you need to accomplish to have life on Earth is done in different ways by different organisms, and even things that we thought, you know, every single organism does it this way, we keep finding exceptions, and I find that really cool and inspiring. And trying to conceptualize myself and the experiences of other disabled people in that way is really helpful for me for going from feeling just hampered by deficits to understanding how this is just a different and creative approach to accomplishing a way of being alive.
Beautiful. And if you want to.
Yeah. You know, I started DJing in like the late 90s, and I had a whole career, a whole life in music. And these days I make DJ mixes kind of just for the community to share joy. I don't know, it's the same name as my social. I don't want to give plugs. I don't make money, you know. It's literally just to share. And I also find joy just in finding community and going out and trying my best to find whatever is left of third spaces. And you know, a lot of people call it like doom scrolling, but I find it like absorbing information. I really love learning and hearing different perspectives, and just that's kind of like what, I don't know, that's kind of what oddly pulls me out of it, is like learning about.
Something along all of these lines of our discussion today that I love so much is the idea that we really are all connected biologically and to the earth chemically and to the rest of the universe atomically, like wonderful Carl Sagan says. We're all made of star stuff. And when we can zoom out and look at ourselves as being so special and beautiful and amazing, that really brings me a lot of joy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. We do have a few questions we weren't able to get to. Are any of the panelists available after? I want to honor everyone's time, but would anyone be open to being approached with any questions? Okay, great. But we should be wrapping up. Again, in case it wasn't obvious, we firmly believe that deliberately working to satisfy access needs is absolutely a form of love. I want to acknowledge that providing access needs is also just the beginning when it comes to ensuring that disabled people can thrive in society, not just to survive, but thrive. As the late great Judy Heumann once said, If I have to feel grateful for an accessible bathroom, when am I ever going to have equality? Because access is so vital, of course, but it's an entry point for our meaningful, transformative engagement with the world. And as Erin pointed out with that Wellstone quote, we all do better when we all do better. We all benefit from having a broad spectrum of human beings in our midst. So let's continue shaking tables at every opportunity to demand the preservation and expansion of protections and tangible supports for our disabled neighbors, for ourselves. Can I get a quick protect section 504 from the crowd? Protect section 504. You don't know what that is? So we keep up the fight because when we fight,
We
win.
that's right. And then Penny, are you still here? Penny is tabling. She is a whammer extraordinaire and has been working with Healing to Hope and has a little table over there. If you'd like, you want to get on the mic or just invite people to come back to there? Yeah, come on down. And this will be that was the wrap up, and now I'm rewinding and Penny's gonna hop on. We can mingle and make our way out, but if you want to come, I don't know how far I can take the mic.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. I will learn.
I am glad to be here. This has been a really wonderful morning. I'm so impressed with every presentation and all the work everybody did to get this act together. So I am a board member of a new US-based nonprofit called Healing to Hope. And Healing to Hope is a sister organization of Anar. And Anar is a program in Palestine based in Bethlehem. And what Anar does is it uses community self-help. And that was so important in the talks today about how important that is. And Anar works it works in the community, but especially with children who have suffered trauma and oppression from the occupation in Palestine. So they have 3 different types of community support. They have where they work to train volunteers and community leaders to recognize and address the mental health needs around them. They have a program called Shababik, a youth mentorship program, which encourages young people 15 to 29 to develop their leadership skills and to serve their communities. And then they have Makan program, which means space.
Just hold it outside.
You got it. Doing great.
And that is the third means of Anar's work, and it works with healing children through creative play. And so I have some handouts here, double-sided, Healing to Hope and Anar. And so please feel free to take these handouts. There is a sign up sheet back there also if you want to be included in to get the newsletter and see what's happening with Anar and Healing to Hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and feel free to mill around. There's some information about Sick from Genocide, which is a campaign that was referenced by Isella earlier.
Don't hesitate to take books.
Nick Shillingford, everyone. It's in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Technically in the neighborhood, and runs Socialist News and Views
Yep.
broadcast. And also, you've probably seen him out and about with his free books. I don't know how you source so much amazing revolutionary and social justice themed material, but you do it and I
Big
salute
books,
you.
yeah, they
Big
make
books,
great
big
presents,
books.
they make great gifts.
So true. And many, many thanks for Alan for standing up here for the duration. Can we give a round of applause? And also a quick shout out to Aaron, who facilitated the sound in a way that I might not have been able to so successfully. So, and I promise this is good. But thank you all for being here.